My name is Mark, 35 years old now, happily married and living in Florida. But what I'm about to tell you happened back in the Midwest, in a house we rented for nearly 10 years. I was a sophomore in high school when we moved in. The house wasn't old, barely a decade old at the time. The previous owners sold it to fund their son's move abroad and to buy another place closer to the city. We were the first people to rent it, and it seemed perfect. 3 bedrooms. One for my parents, one for my 2 sisters, and one I shared with my brother. Nothing seemed off at first. It was just another suburban house with creaky floors, pale walls, and a big backyard. Our room was at the back of the house, overlooking a small backyard fenced with weathered wood. The room itself was pretty typical for 2 teenage boys. A bunk bed pushed against the far wall, posters of baseball players and old rock bands tacked up unevenly, and a cluttered desk piled with school books and video games. I always slept on the top bunk. It was a small space, but it felt like mine, a refuge where I could escape the noise of home and school. Everything seemed normal that first week, but it was late summer, and the air had started to cool just enough to make sleeping with the windows open tempting. I loved the feeling of the soft breeze brushing my face as I drifted off. But the open window also carried strange sounds from outside. Rustling leaves, the occasional distant bark, or the hum of a car passing by. Nothing frightening. Or so I thought. One night I woke up feeling miserable. I had caught a fever. My head was pounding, my throat dry and burning, and my body felt heavy and weak. My mom was a nurse, so she was quick to notice the signs. She kept a cold cloth on my forehead and left the door open a crack so she could check in on me more easily. Usually we kept our bedroom door shut at night. My brother and I weren't big fans of open doors, especially at night when the house felt too quiet and shadows seemed to stretch too long across the walls. But sick nights were different. Mom wanted to make sure we were okay. That night I woke up many times, my fever spiking and then fading. Each time I'd hear the soft creak of the wooden floorboards outside our room as my parents moved around the house. Their voices were muffled through the walls, gentle and reassuring. But then at some point deep into the night, when everything was silent and still, I woke up again. Wide awake, but not really sure why. I was drenched in sweat, my heart beating fast and my head spinning. I blinked slowly, and that's when I saw it. Standing in the doorway, just barely outlined against the dim light of the hallway, was a dark figure. I couldn't see any details. No face, no features. Just a tall shadow, standing perfectly still, like it was watching me. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant ticking of the wall clock. My breath caught in my throat. I froze. I wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. My mind raced to rationalize what I was seeing. Maybe it was my mom coming to check on me. Maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe I was still too feverish and dreaming. But this wasn't a dream. The figure didn't move or flicker like shadows usually do. It just stood there, unblinking, unmoving. I could feel its eyes on me, even though I couldn't see them. That feeling of being watched sent a cold wave of dread crawling down my spine. My head throbbed harder and the room seemed to close in around me. I tried to call out, but my throat was dry and sore, and no sound came out. I blinked several times, hoping the figure would disappear. When it didn't, I slowly pulled the blanket over my head, trying to hide, hoping it would go away if I didn't look. But I was still terrified enough to keep one eye slightly open through the blanket's edge. After what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds, I thought I heard the figure move, but I wasn't sure. The door creaked slightly. My heart jumped to my throat and I squeezed my eyes shut tight. When I finally opened my eyes again, the figure was gone from the doorway. I breathed a shaky sigh of relief and closed my eyes, hoping to fall back asleep. But then, just as I was starting to drift off, I felt a presence closer. I opened my eyes slowly and my blood ran cold. The shadowy figure was no longer in the doorway. It was inside the room, standing right next to my bed. I wanted to move, to scream, to run, but I couldn't. My body was completely paralyzed. I felt trapped inside myself, unable to lift a finger or even turn my head. I lay there, frozen, my heart hammering so loud I was sure it would burst. The figure loomed silently over me, the shape impossible to describe, like a smear of darkness without any clear edges or features. The only thing I could focus on was its presence, cold, heavy, oppressive. It felt like the air itself had thickened around me. I forced my eyes to stay open. Closing them felt like giving in to the darkness, and I was terrified of what might happen if I let go. My head pounded fiercely, like someone was hammering inside my skull. Silent tears slipping down my cheeks. I whispered prayers under my breath, words I hadn't spoken since I was a child. Please go away. Please don't hurt me. Please let me wake up. Minutes felt like hours. Time lost all meaning in that room with the shadow looming over me. I wanted to tell my brother to wake him up, but my voice was gone. Then, footsteps in the hallway. I recognized the familiar, soft shuffle of my mom's shoes on the floor. She was coming to check on me. The figure vanished the moment she opened the door and stepped inside, her concerned eyes falling on me. "Mark, what's wrong?" she asked, moving quickly to my bedside. I tried to speak, but only tears spilled down on my face as I nodded toward the doorway where the figure had been. "I saw something," I whispered, barely audible. She pulled the blanket around me, stroked my hair, and said gently, "It's just the fever. You're probably having bad dreams." But I knew it was more than that. When I woke in the morning, the sunlight streaming through the window made the room feel warm and safe again. But the memory of that night stayed with me, like a shadow that wouldn't fade. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it was just a fever dream, an unfortunate side effect of being sick. I told myself the shadow was a trick of my tired mind. But deep down, I was scared. Because even now, when I think back, I can still feel those eyes on me. And I still remember the way the darkness moved just beyond the edges of my vision, waiting. And that night was only the beginning. After that first terrifying night, I thought the shadowy figure had disappeared for good. I told myself it was just my fever playing tricks on my mind, a product of exhaustion and sickness. My mom said the same, assuring me I was fine and that it was probably just a nightmare. Ethan didn't say much. He never mentioned seeing or feeling anything unusual. Maybe he was too young to notice or just didn't experience it. For a while, things felt normal again. I stayed healthy for a few weeks, even slept in my room without any fear. But then, as the leaves started turning orange and fall crept in, I caught a cold again. It was nothing serious at first, just a scratchy throat and a stuffy nose. But soon enough, the fever came back. That night, I found myself lying in bed, dreading the familiar ache in my head. The room felt colder than usual, even with the heater on low. Ethan had fallen asleep beside me, his breathing steady and calm. I closed my eyes, trying to will myself to sleep, but the pounding headache wouldn't let me rest. Then, just after midnight, I woke up again. This time, the darkness in the room felt heavier, thicker, almost like the air was pressing down on my chest. I wanted to call out for my mom, but the dry lump in my throat made me choke on the sound. My body wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed, trapped inside my own skin like a statue. And then I saw it. The same shadowy figure from before, standing silently in the corner near the window. The moonlight coming through the glass didn't touch it. It was like the darkness had its own shape, unmoving, solid. I could feel its gaze burning into me, cold and heavy, as if it was feeding off my fear. The room was silent except for the shallow, panicked rhythm of my own breathing. I forced my eyes open, desperate not to lose myself to sleep and whatever nightmare this might become. I felt tears sliding down on my cheeks, but I couldn't make a sound. The paralysis held me tight. It was like being trapped underwater, fighting to surface but never breaking through. I prayed silently, hoping Mom would come again. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time lost all meaning. The shadow stayed, watching, waiting. I was too scared to look away, too scared to blink. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, melting away until it was gone. Mom's footsteps came down the hall again. She opened the door quietly and saw me awake, eyes red from crying. "Mark, are you okay?" she asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. I tried to tell her what I saw, but my voice was still weak. I could only nod. She sighed and said softly, "It's just the fever. Maybe you're having some bad dreams. You're okay now." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the terror didn't fade. The next day, I begged to sleep in my parents' room. I couldn't face that empty bedroom alone. They agreed, and for the first time in weeks, I had a full night's rest without waking up in a cold sweat. Weeks later, I got sick again, and the shadow came back, always at the same time, just after midnight, silent and still, waiting for me to wake. Ethan never saw it. My parents didn't believe me when I tried to explain. Some friends suggested it was a fever dream or maybe just stress, but I knew better. Eventually, I stopped sleeping in my room altogether when I was sick. I stayed with my parents or on the living room couch, wherever I felt safest. And strangely, the shadow never appeared anywhere else but my bedroom. I stopped telling anyone about it. I didn't want to sound crazy, and honestly, I was too scared to talk about what was happening. One day, when my parents told me we'd been moving, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I thought I'd finally be free of whatever haunted that room. Sadness because I was leaving behind the only home I'd ever known. Months later, I heard from my parents that the new tenants were having strange experiences. They talked about flickering lights, doors creaking open on their own, and a dark figure lurking in the corners, just like I'd seen. After hearing the new tenants' stories, I realized the shadow wasn't just a one-time thing tied to my illness or imagination. It was real in some way. A presence bound to the house, or maybe something deeper. For years, I wondered what it wanted from me. Was it trying to scare me, to warn me, or was it just lonely? Thank you to everyone who listened to my story. If you like this, don't forget to like and subscribe.